I returned to surprise my husband with my pregnancy, but overhearing him and his mom terrified me more than anything. My name is Layla. I am 31 years old, and I used to believe in perfect love. I used to believe that my husband adored me, that his mother accepted me, that I was the luckiest woman alive. The day I held that pregnancy test with 2 red lines, my heart overflowed with pure joy. I thought this would be the happiest surprise of our lives. But the moment I stepped into our home to share that news, I became the one who received the most terrifying shock of my entire existence. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If you believe in standing up for yourself, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to where it all began. 5 years ago, my life looked completely different from what it became. I was working as a registered nurse at one of the largest hospitals in Austin, Texas. Every single day, I would wake up at 5:30 in the morning, put on my scrubs, and drive through the quiet streets before the city fully woke up. Nursing was not just my job, it was my calling. I had watched my grandmother spend her final years in a hospital, and the nurses who cared for her became my heroes. They showed compassion when our family was falling apart with grief. They held my hand when I could not stop crying. That experience shaped everything I wanted to become. I grew up in a middle-class family in a small town, about 2 hours outside of Austin. My father worked as an electrician for 32 years, coming home every evening with calloused hands and a tired smile. My mother taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, spending her weekends grading papers and planning lessons at our kitchen table. They were not wealthy, but they gave me something money could never buy. They taught me the value of hard work, honesty, and family. Every Sunday we would gather around the dinner table, share stories about our week, and remind each other that no matter what happened, we would always have each other. Growing up with those values, I always dreamed of building my own family one day. I imagined a loving husband who would look at me like my father looked at my mother. I imagined children running through our backyard, their laughter filling the air. I imagined holidays filled with warmth and traditions we would create together. That dream lived in my heart for as long as I could remember. Then I met Derek. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when my entire world shifted. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital and desperately needed coffee before driving home. There was this small cafe about 2 blocks from the hospital, a cozy place with exposed brick walls and the smell of freshly ground beans floating through the air. I walked in exhausted, my hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, not caring about how I looked. I was standing in line scrolling through my phone when I felt something warm splash against my arm. I looked up to see a tall man with brown hair and apologetic eyes holding an empty coffee cup. His latte had somehow ended up all over my sleeve. For a moment I was annoyed. My scrubs were already stained from work, and now I had coffee dripping down my arm. But then he spoke. His voice was gentle, genuinely horrified by what had happened. He grabbed napkins from the counter and started dabbing at my sleeve while apologizing profusely. He said he would pay for my dry cleaning, buy me a new shirt, do whatever it took to make this right. There was something about the way he stumbled over his words, clearly embarrassed, but also somehow charming. His name was Derek. He was 33 years old, an architect at a firm downtown, and by the time he finished apologizing, he had somehow convinced me to let him make it up to me with dinner. That first date turned into a second, then a third, then countless evenings spent together. Derek was everything I had dreamed about. He remembered small details like how I preferred my coffee, with exactly 2 sugars and a splash of oat milk. He sent me flowers at work just because he was thinking of me. When I talked about my day, he actually listened, asking follow-up questions, remembering the names of my patients and coworkers. We would spend weekends exploring Austin together. Long walks around Lady Bird Lake, picnics at Zilker Park, cooking elaborate dinners in his apartment, where we would inevitably make a mess and end up ordering takeout instead. He made me laugh harder than anyone ever had. He held me when I cried after losing a patient. He showed up for me in ways I had only imagined in my dreams. After 2 years of dating, Derek proposed. He took me back to that same coffee shop where we first met, got down on one knee, right there between the counter and the pastry display, and asked me to spend forever with him. The other customers clapped. The barista cried, and I said yes, without a single moment of hesitation. Our wedding was exactly what I had always wanted. Nothing extravagant, just about 80 of our closest friends and family gathered at a beautiful venue outside the city. I remember walking down the aisle toward Derek, seeing tears in his eyes as he watched me approach. We wrote our own vows, He promised to love me through every storm, to choose me every single day, to build a life with me that we would both be proud of. I believed every word. The first 3 years of our marriage felt like a beautiful dream. We bought a small house in the suburbs of Austin, a 3-bedroom place with a backyard big enough for the children we would someday have. We spent months decorating it together, arguing playfully over paint colors and furniture styles. Derek built me a bookshelf for the living room because he knew how much I loved reading. I created a small garden in the backyard because he mentioned once that he missed the vegetables his grandmother used to grow. He seemed like the perfect husband in every way. We split household chores without keeping score. He supported my career, never complaining when I worked overtime or came home too exhausted to cook. We had date nights every Friday, even if it was just ordering pizza and watching movies on the couch. I thought we had built something unbreakable. I had no idea how wrong I was. The first time I met Patricia, Derek's mother, was about 3 months before our wedding. Derek had been somewhat vague about his family. I knew his father had passed away when Derek was 15, leaving Patricia to raise him alone. Derek spoke of his mother with deep respect, describing her as a strong woman who had sacrificed everything for him. I admired that story. I respected any woman who could raise a child alone and still send him to college, still support him becoming an architect, still shape him into what I believed was a wonderful man. Patricia was 62 years old, slender, with carefully styled gray hair and a wardrobe that always looked expensive. She lived in a well-maintained house about 20 minutes from where Derek and I would eventually settle. From the outside, she appeared to be a sophisticated, caring mother who simply loved her only son. Our first meeting happened at a restaurant Patricia had chosen. It was fancier than anywhere I usually dined, the kind of place with cloth napkins and a wine list thicker than a novel. I dressed carefully, wanting to make a good impression. Derek assured me I had nothing to worry about, that his mother would love me because he loved me. Patricia smiled when we arrived, standing to hug Derek tightly before turning to me. She looked me up and down quickly, so fast I almost thought I imagined it. Then she embraced me and said it was wonderful to finally meet the woman who had stolen her son's heart. Her words were warm, but something in her eyes felt calculating. I dismissed it as nerves, telling myself I was being paranoid. Throughout that first dinner, Patricia asked me dozens of questions. Where did I grow up? What did my parents do for work? How much did nurses typically earn? What were my plans for the future? Did I want children? How many? When? The questions felt like an interview rather than a getting-to-know-you conversation. But Derek seemed unbothered, proudly answering some questions for me, beaming whenever I spoke about my career or my family. Near the end of the meal, Patricia made a comment that stuck with me. She said I was quite pretty, just perhaps a bit thin, and wondered if I was eating enough. She followed it up by saying, nursing must be such exhausting work, and she hoped I would still have energy to take care of Derek properly once we were married. Derek laughed it off, saying his mother was just being a mom. I laughed too, but something uncomfortable settled in my stomach. Over the following months, I tried my best to build a relationship with Patricia. I invited her to help with wedding planning. I sent her photos and updates. I included her in decisions about flowers and catering. She seemed appreciative, though her suggestions were less like suggestions and more like directives. She had strong opinions about everything, and Derek always sided with her, saying she just wanted the best for us. After the wedding, Patricia's presence in our lives became more constant than I expected. She called Derek multiple times a day, sometimes 3 or 4 calls before noon. She would show up at our house without warning, letting herself in with a key Derek had given her, rearranging things in our kitchen or living room. She once reorganized my entire pantry while I was at work, explaining that my system made no sense. I tried to address it with Derek, gently suggesting that maybe his mother could call before coming over, or perhaps we could establish some boundaries. Derek looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. He said his mother was just trying to help, that she was lonely since his father died, that I should be grateful to have a mother-in-law who cared so much. I felt guilty for even bringing it up. Whenever we had family dinners at Patricia's house, she would serve elaborate meals she had cooked all day. Then she would watch me eat, commenting on my portions, comparing her recipes to anything I'd ever attempted to cook. Once I brought a dessert. I had made a chocolate cake that took me hours to prepare. Patricia took one bite, smiled, and said it was interesting, then added that Derek had always preferred her apple pie anyway. Derek agreed, asking if she had any left over. My cake sat barely touched on the counter. The first truly significant incident happened on our first wedding anniversary. I had planned a romantic evening at home, cooking Derek's favorite meal, setting up candles throughout the house, buying new lingerie I thought he would love. Derek left work early, texting me that he could not wait to celebrate together. An hour before we were supposed to sit down for dinner, I heard the front door open. Patricia walked in carrying grocery bags, announcing that she had come to cook for us since anniversaries were special, and I should not have to work on such an important day. I stood in the kitchen I had spent hours preparing, watching her unpack ingredients that would replace everything I'd already made. I looked at Derek, waiting for him to say something. He just smiled, thanking his mother for being so thoughtful. The dinner became a meal for 3. Patricia sat between us at the table, dominating the conversation with stories about Derek's childhood. My romantic evening evaporated completely. That night, after Patricia finally left, I cried in the bathroom with the water running so Derek would not hear. I told myself it was a one-time thing. I told myself she meant well. I told myself I was overreacting. But deep down, a small voice whispered that something was very wrong. I was just too afraid to listen. The pressure started subtly at first, like a drip of water that eventually becomes a flood. About 2 years into our marriage, Patricia began asking about grandchildren at every single gathering. At first it seemed like normal curiosity from a woman who had raised her only child and now wanted to see the next generation. But the questions quickly became relentless. Every Sunday dinner included some variation of the same conversation. Patricia would look at me with expectant eyes and ask if there was any news yet. She would mention how she was not getting any younger, how she wanted to be able to run around with her grandchildren before her knees gave out entirely. She would sigh dramatically and say she just hoped it would happen before it was too late. Derek never seemed bothered by these comments. In fact, he started echoing them at home. He would mention in passing that maybe we should start trying soon, that his mother had a point about timing, that we were not getting any younger either. I wanted children, I truly did, but I wanted it to happen naturally without the crushing weight of expectation pressing down on me every single day. Then the articles started arriving. Patricia would email me links to studies about declining fertility after 30. She mailed me pamphlets about prenatal vitamins, fertility tracking apps, dietary changes that supposedly increased chances of conception. Every gift she gave me seemed connected to pregnancy somehow. A book about preparing for motherhood. A onesie she had found that was too cute to resist just in case. A spa certificate for a massage she said would help me relax since stress apparently prevented conception. During one particularly uncomfortable dinner, Patricia looked directly at me and asked if I had considered seeing a fertility specialist. She said 3 years of marriage without a baby seemed concerning. She mentioned that her friend's daughter had struggled too, and it turned out the problem was her diet and lifestyle. She suggested I might want to examine what I was doing wrong. I looked at Derek, expecting him to defend me. Instead, he nodded slowly and said maybe his mother had a point, that it would not hurt to get checked out just in case. I felt something crack inside me that night. The man who had promised to always have my back was sitting across from me, agreeing with his mother that I was somehow failing at something. The arguments between Derek and me began increasing. They always seemed to circle back to Patricia somehow. I would express frustration about his mother's comments, and he would accuse me of being too sensitive. I would ask him to set boundaries, and he would say I was trying to damage his relationship with his only living parent. Every conversation ended with me feeling like the villain for wanting basic respect in my own marriage. Eventually worn down and desperate to restore peace, I agreed to start actively trying to get pregnant. Part of me hoped that maybe a baby would help. Maybe once Patricia got the grandchild she so desperately wanted, she would finally back off. Maybe Derek and I could find our way back to the connection we once had. I recognize now how flawed that thinking was, but at the time I was grasping at anything that might save us. 6 months passed with no success. Every negative pregnancy test felt like a personal failure. Patricia's comments became more pointed, her disappointment more obvious. She started making references to other women who seemed to have no trouble conceiving, wondering aloud what made them different from me. During one particularly painful dinner, she mentioned that Derek's cousin's wife had gotten pregnant on her first try, adding that some women were just more naturally suited for motherhood. Derek suggested we both get tested, and I agreed, despite feeling humiliated by the entire process. We visited a specialist who ran every test imaginable. The results showed that both of us were perfectly healthy. There was no medical reason we were not conceiving yet. The doctor said it was simply a matter of timing and patience. I hoped this news would ease the pressure, Instead, Patricia seemed to take it as confirmation that I was the problem in some intangible way. If there was nothing medically wrong, then clearly I was doing something to prevent pregnancy. Maybe I was working too much. Maybe I was too stressed. Maybe I was not taking care of myself properly. The blame always circled back to me. 3 months after those tests, something changed. I started feeling unusually tired even on days when I had not worked. Certain smells that never bothered me before suddenly made me nauseous. My body felt different in ways I could not quite articulate. I tried not to get my hopes up, but somewhere deep inside I knew. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home from work one evening. Derek was working late, so I had the house to myself. I remember standing in our bathroom, hands shaking as I waited for the result. When those 2 red lines appeared clear and undeniable, I dropped to my knees and sobbed. After everything we had been through, after all the pressure and pain and feeling like a failure, I was finally pregnant. My first instinct was to call Derek immediately to share this incredible news, but I stopped myself. I wanted this moment to be special. I wanted to see his face when I told him. I decided to plan the perfect surprise to create a memory we would cherish forever. I bought a small velvet box and placed the pregnancy test inside. I added a handwritten card that said, "Hello, Daddy," in careful lettering. I imagined Derek opening it, his face transforming with joy, sweeping me into his arms and spinning me around. I imagined us finally united, finally happy, finally becoming the family I'd always dreamed about. I had no idea that my carefully planned surprise would reveal something far more devastating than I could have ever imagined. 3 days before I discovered the truth, my hospital announced that I would be attending a medical conference in Houston. The event was scheduled to last 3 days, featuring workshops on new nursing protocols and networking opportunities with healthcare professionals from across the state. Normally, I would have been excited about the opportunity. This time, I could barely focus on anything except the secret growing inside me. I packed my bags while Derek watched from the doorway of our bedroom. He seemed unusually cheerful, offering to drive me to the airport, asking if I needed anything before I left. At the time, I thought he was simply being supportive. Looking back, I wonder if he was relieved to have me out of the house for a few days. The conference hotel was comfortable, and the presentations were informative, but my mind kept drifting to the surprise waiting in my suitcase. I had brought the velvet box with me, planning to give it to Derek the moment I returned. I pictured his reaction dozens of times, each scenario more heartwarming than the last. On the second day of the conference, I received news that the final sessions had been canceled due to a scheduling conflict. Attendees were free to leave a day early or explore Houston on their own. Most people chose to extend their stay, taking advantage of the unexpected free time. I immediately thought of Derek. This was perfect. I could drive home early and surprise him that very evening. The timing felt like fate, like everything was aligning to make this moment even more magical. I did not bother calling to tell him I was coming. The whole point was the surprise. I checked out of the hotel by noon and started the drive back to Austin. The journey was about 2.5 hours, and I spent most of it daydreaming about becoming a mother. I thought about names, about nursery colors, about tiny clothes and first steps and bedtime stories. Every mile brought me closer to what I believed would be the happiest moment of my marriage. About an hour outside of Austin, I stopped at a small town to pick up supplies for the surprise. I found a florist and bought a bouquet of sunflowers, Derek's favorite. I grabbed sparkling grape juice from a grocery store since I could not have champagne anymore. I purchased a package of battery-operated candles to set up around the living room. Everything had to be perfect. As I loaded the items into my car, I imagined how the evening would unfold. I would sneak into the house while Derek was in another room. I would set up the candles and flowers. I would hide the velvet box somewhere obvious. Then I would call him into the room and watch as he discovered the truth. My heart raced with anticipation. When I pulled onto our street, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the neighborhood. Everything looked peaceful, normal, exactly as it always did. Then I noticed another car in our driveway. Patricia's silver sedan was parked right behind Derek's truck. My initial reaction was disappointment. I had wanted this moment to be private, just between Derek and me. Having Patricia there would change everything. She would probably take over the announcement, somehow making it about her becoming a grandmother rather than about us becoming parents. But then I reconsidered. Maybe this was even better. I could tell both of them at once. Patricia would finally get what she had been pressuring us about for years. Maybe this would change our relationship. Maybe once she knew about the baby, she would treat me differently. Maybe we could finally become a real family. I grabbed the flowers and the velvet box, but left the other supplies in the car. I would come back for them later. Right now, I just wanted to see the look on their faces. I walked up to the front door as quietly as possible, not wanting to announce my arrival. The element of surprise was essential. I turned my key in the lock, slowly easing the door open without making a sound. The house was dim, most of the curtains drawn, despite it being afternoon. I could hear voices coming from the living room. I set the flowers down on the entry table and began walking toward the voices, the velvet box clutched tightly in my hand. I was maybe 10 feet from the living room entrance when something stopped me cold. It was not any particular word that made me freeze. It was the tone. Patricia's voice was sharp, almost aggressive, nothing like the sweet facade she usually maintained around me. And Derek was responding in a way I had never heard before, almost submissive, agreeable. Some instinct deep within me screamed to wait. Do not walk in yet. Do not let them know you are here. Just listen. So I did. I pressed myself against the wall just outside the living room, heart pounding so loudly I feared they might hear it. And what I heard in the next several minutes would shatter every illusion I had ever held about my marriage. Patricia's voice cut through the quiet of the house like a blade. The words coming from the living room were clear enough that I did not have to strain to hear them. Every syllable felt like a physical blow. You need to divorce her, Derek. I have told you this from the very beginning. She is not right for you. She never was. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. My entire body had begun to tremble. The velvet box in my other hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Derek's response was not what I expected. I waited for him to defend me, to tell his mother she was wrong to stand up for our marriage. Instead, his voice came out resigned, almost tired. Mom, it is not that simple. We have been married for 3 years. There are legal issues, the house shared accounts. I cannot just walk away overnight. Of course you can, Patricia replied, her tone dismissive. I already spoke with a lawyer. Everything is arranged. All you need to do is sign the papers. My knees felt like they might buckle. I leaned harder against the wall, struggling to breathe quietly. They had already consulted a lawyer. This was not a spontaneous conversation. This was a plan. Derek sighed heavily. What did the lawyer say about the assets? We can protect most of what matters. The house is in your name primarily. Your retirement accounts are separate. She will get something, of course, but not as much as she might think she deserves. I heard movement, someone shifting on the couch perhaps. Then Patricia continued. Besides, this is not just about money. This is about your future. 3 years of marriage and still no children. I told you before you married her that girl would not give you a family. Some women are simply not capable. The irony was so painful I nearly laughed out loud. I was standing there pregnant with her grandchild, while she condemned me as barren. I know, Mom. Derek's voice sounded defeated. I know you were right about her. Of course I was right. I am always right about these things. I knew from the moment I met her that she was not good enough for you. Her family, her background, everything about her was wrong. She comes from nothing, Derek. An electrician and a schoolteacher. What kind of foundation is that? I thought of my parents, how hard they had worked their entire lives, how much they had sacrificed to raise me with good values. Patricia was dismissing them as nothing, as if human worth could be measured by profession and income. And speaking of better options, Patricia said, her tone brightening considerably, I ran into Catherine Madison last week. You remember Madison, do you not? Her daughter Catherine has been asking about you. Madison. I knew that name. Derek had mentioned her once in passing years ago. They had dated briefly in college, something that ended when Derek moved to Austin for his career. She was the daughter of one of Patricia's closest friends, someone Patricia had always considered appropriately suitable for her son. Catherine is doing wonderfully, Patricia continued. She finished her MBA, she is working at her father's company, and she is still single. Can you believe that a beautiful, successful woman like her is still available? Mom, Derek's protest was weak, barely an objection at all. I am just saying. She comes from a good family. Her father owns 3 businesses. Her mother and I have been friends for 40 years. And she always had feelings for you, Derek. She told me so herself when I saw her. I know she did. My blood turned to ice. His response was not surprise. It was acknowledgement. You have seen her recently, have you not? Patricia's voice carried a knowing quality. The silence that followed was damning. Then Derek spoke again, quieter now. We have had coffee a few times, just to catch up. And you were right. She understands me. She gets what I want from life. She is not always exhausted from work, not always complaining about being tired or stressed. I had to bite my lip hard enough to taste blood. All those 12-hour shifts I worked to help support our family. All those times I came home drained, but still tried to be present for him. He saw my dedication to my career as a character flaw. Catherine would give you beautiful children, Patricia said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Good genes, good upbringing. Not like that Layla with her common family and her inability to conceive. She is not unable to conceive. The doctors said we were both healthy. Then she is preventing it somehow. Maybe she does not actually want children. Maybe she has been lying to you this whole time. I would not put it past her. Derek did not defend me against this accusation either. He simply let it hang in the air, an unchallenged indictment of my character. I just want you to be happy, sweetheart. Patricia continued, her voice shifting to something almost tender. I gave up everything for you after your father died. I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. I deserve to see you with someone worthy. I deserve grandchildren before I die. I know, Mom. I know what you sacrificed. Then do the right thing. End this mistake. Catherine is waiting for you. A real future is waiting for you. All you have to do is let go of that woman. There was another pause. Then Derek spoke the words that destroyed what remained of my heart. You are right. Layla was never going to be what I needed. I think I knew that for a while now. I was just too afraid to admit it. I could not stay there any longer. The velvet box slipped from my fingers, landing silently on the carpet. I did not pick it up. I turned and walked toward the front door, on legs that barely felt attached to my body. Somehow I made it outside without making a sound. Somehow I reached my car without collapsing. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at nothing, my hands shaking so violently I could not grip the steering wheel. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my husband, it was all a lie. And the baby growing inside me belonged to a man who was planning to abandon us. But somewhere beneath the shock and pain, something else was stirring. It felt like the first spark of a fire. I had spent 3 years being manipulated, belittled, and undermined. I had doubted myself, apologized constantly, tried desperately to please people who were never going to accept me. Not anymore. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were still trembling, but I managed to open the voice recording app. Then I got out of the car and walked back toward the house. I had more evidence to gather, and this time I would not be the one caught off guard. I slipped back into the house just as quietly as before, my phone recording everything. Patricia and Derek were still talking, unaware that their conspiracy had an audience. For the next 15 minutes, I stood in that hallway and captured every damning word. Derek talked about how he had been meeting Catherine for lunch regularly for 6 months. He admitted that their relationship had progressed beyond friendship, though he danced around the specifics. Patricia encouraged him, praising Catherine's qualities, while continuing to tear me down. They discussed logistics of the divorce, how to minimize what I would receive, how to time the announcement for maximum advantage. When they finally moved to the kitchen for drinks, I slipped out the front door again. This time I did not stop to look back. I drove directly to the home of my best friend Meredith, a woman I had known since nursing school, who happened to be one of the sharpest family law attorneys in Austin. Meredith took one look at my face and pulled me inside without a word. Her husband took their 2 children upstairs, giving us privacy. I sat on her couch and told her everything, my voice cracking multiple times but never quite breaking. When I finished, I played her the recording. Her expression shifted from concern to controlled fury as she listened. When the recording ended, she set down her glass of wine and looked at me with fierce determination. "They are not going to get away with this," she said. "I promise you that." We talked for hours, strategizing, planning, examining every angle. Meredith advised me not to confront Derek yet. We needed more evidence, more documentation, a stronger case. She recommended a private investigator she had worked with before, someone discreet and thorough. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. I had to go home sleep beside the man who was planning to betray me and act as though nothing had changed. Every morning I smiled at Derek. Every evening I made small talk. Every night I lay awake while he slept, planning my next move. The private investigator worked quickly. Within 10 days he had photographs of Derek and Catherine together at restaurants and parking lots, entering and leaving her apartment. He had copies of text messages recovered from account records, messages that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Meredith also discovered something that made my blood boil. Derek and Patricia had opened a joint bank account that I knew nothing about. Over the past 18 months, Derek had been quietly transferring money from our shared accounts into this hidden one. Not large amounts, nothing that would trigger immediate suspicion, but the total had grown to over $40,000. Money I had earned as well, money that was legally half mine, being siphoned away to prepare for his exit. Armed with all of this evidence, Meredith prepared divorce papers that would protect me completely. She ensured that the documentation of Derek's infidelity and financial deception would be central to any proceedings. Texas law looked unfavorably on adultery and hidden assets. Derek and Patricia had been so focused on their own scheming that they never considered I might be building a case against them. I also visited my doctor to confirm the pregnancy officially and establish medical records. I was 8 weeks along, healthy, everything progressing normally. My baby was thriving despite the chaos surrounding us. That knowledge gave me strength when everything else felt impossible. Finally, I was ready. I called Derek and suggested we have a family dinner at our house that weekend. I said I had been feeling distant from Patricia lately and wanted to make an effort to reconnect. Derek seemed surprised but pleased. He offered to tell his mother himself, assuring me that she would be delighted. I smiled and thanked him, marveling at how easily the lies came to him. Saturday evening arrived with a clarity I had not felt in years. I spent the afternoon preparing the house not for a romantic surprise, but for a reckoning. I set the dining table with our good china. I cooked a meal that required just enough attention to keep me busy, but not so much that I could not stay composed. I placed copies of the evidence in envelopes under each place setting. Patricia arrived first, bringing wine I would not be drinking, and a casserole I would never eat. She greeted me with her usual false warmth, commenting that I looked tired and asking if work had been particularly stressful lately. I smiled and said everything was wonderful. Derek came downstairs looking relaxed, pleased with how the evening seemed to be going. He kissed my cheek and I let him, knowing it would be one of the last times he ever touched me. The three of us sat down at the table like any normal family preparing to share a meal. "Before we eat," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm, "I have something I would like to share." They both looked at me expectantly. Patricia probably hoped I was about to apologize for some imagined slight. Derek probably expected nothing at all. I reached under my place setting and pulled out a thick envelope. Then I slid it across the table to Derek. "What is this?" he asked, still smiling. "Open it." He unsealed the envelope and removed the stack of papers. I watched his face as he registered what he was looking at. Divorce papers. His smile vanished instantly. "Layla, what is going on?" His voice had an edge of panic I had never heard before. "Keep reading." He flipped through the pages, his expression growing more stricken with each one. The photographs of him with Catherine, printouts of their text messages, bank statements showing the hidden account. Every piece of evidence laid out in damning detail. Patricia grabbed the papers from his hands, scanning them rapidly. Her face went from confused to shocked to furious in seconds. "How did you get these?" she demanded. "That is not really your concern," I replied. "What matters is that I have them. What matters is that I know exactly what both of you have been doing." Derek tried to speak, stumbling over his words. "Layla, I can explain. This is not what it looks like. Those pictures, those messages, it was just what," I cut him off. "Just an affair with your ex-girlfriend, while you and your mother plotted to divorce me and take everything, just lies, and manipulation, and theft from your own wife." "Theft is a strong word," Patricia interjected. That money was Derek's. That money was earned during our marriage, making it community property under Texas law, which means Derek transferred marital assets without my knowledge or consent. My attorney will be addressing that among other things. Patricia's composure cracked. You cannot do this. You have no idea who you are dealing with. I will destroy you in court. Actually, I know exactly who I am dealing with. I stood in our hallway 2 weeks ago and listened to every word you said about me, about my family, about how I was not good enough for your precious son. I have the recording on my phone, and my attorney already has copies. The color drained from her face. Derek looked between his mother and me, apparently unable to form a coherent sentence. There is one more thing you should know, I said, standing up from the table. I am pregnant. 8 weeks. I found out the day I came home early from Houston. I was going to surprise Derek with the news. Instead, I got to hear him agree with his mother that I would never give him children. Derek's expression shifted to something that might have been regret. Layla, if you had known what, you would have waited longer to divorce me. You would have hidden the affair better. You would have pretended to love me a little while longer while you continued sneaking around with Catherine. He had no answer. Here is what is going to happen, I continued. You are going to sign those papers. You are going to accept the settlement my attorney has outlined, which is more than fair considering the circumstances. And you are going to stay away from me while I figure out how to raise this child without a father who never deserved to be one. Patricia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is outrageous. Derek, tell her she cannot do this. But Derek just sat there staring at the evidence of his betrayal, saying nothing at all. I picked up my purse and my keys. I will be staying with friends until the paperwork is finalized. My attorney will be in touch. Do not contact me directly. And Patricia, do not ever speak to me or about me again. Whatever relationship you thought we had, it is over. I walked out of that house without looking back. Behind me, I could hear Patricia screaming at Derek, blaming him for getting caught, already rewriting the narrative to protect herself. It did not matter anymore. I was done being part of their story. The divorce took 3 months to finalize. With the evidence Meredith had compiled, Derek had no leverage to fight. His attorney advised him to accept the settlement rather than risk a lengthy court battle that would only expose more of his behavior. He signed everything without requesting modifications. I received half of all marital assets, including my share of the hidden account and equity in the house. Derek kept the house itself but had to refinance to pay me out. I also received full custody of our unborn child, with Derek granted limited visitation rights that he would need to formally request once the baby arrived. Word spread through our social circle about what had happened. I did not share details publicly, but enough people knew enough pieces that the truth emerged on its own. Derek's reputation suffered considerably. Several of his colleagues distanced themselves. His relationship with Catherine apparently faltered under the weight of the scandal. I heard through mutual friends that she ended things after discovering how badly he had handled the situation. Patricia never apologized. I did not expect her to. In her mind, I remained the villain who had ruined her son's life. But she no longer had any power over me, and that was apology enough. The first few months after filing for divorce were brutal. I moved in with my parents, temporarily returning to the small town where I had grown up. My mother held me while I cried. My father fixed things around the house to stay busy, his way of showing love. They never questioned my decision. They never made me feel ashamed. They simply supported me while I tried to rebuild. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma. Twice a week, I sat in her office and unpacked everything I had experienced. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the way I had been conditioned to doubt my own perceptions. Understanding what had happened to me was the first step toward healing from it. As my pregnancy progressed, my focus shifted from the past to the future. I transferred my nursing license to a hospital near my parents' home. I found a small apartment just 10 minutes away from them. I decorated the nursery in soft yellows and greens colors that felt hopeful without being tied to any expectation. My daughter arrived on a crisp October morning after 14 hours of labor. I named her Lily after the flowers my grandmother used to grow in her garden. She had my eyes and the most perfect little fingers I had ever seen. The moment the nurse placed her in my arms, every ounce of pain from the previous year melted away. This tiny person was my future. Everything else was just the past. Derek attended the birth per our custody agreement. He held Lily for about 20 minutes, looking uncomfortable and uncertain. Patricia was not allowed in the room. I had made that boundary clear from the beginning, and my attorney had ensured it was legally enforceable. In the months that followed, Derek's involvement remained minimal. He sent child support payments on time as required, but his visits were infrequent and brief. I think he struggled to reconcile the reality of fatherhood with the fantasy escape he had planned. Or perhaps he simply did not care as much as he claimed. Either way, Lily and I built our lives without depending on him. My career flourished in the new environment. The smaller hospital had a tight-knit staff who welcomed me warmly. I received a promotion to charge nurse within 18 months. My co-workers became friends, then something closer to family. We celebrated holidays together, supported each other through challenges, formed bonds that I had desperately needed. Lily grew into a curious, joyful child who laughed at everything and feared nothing. She took her first steps in my parents' living room, surrounded by people who adored her. She spoke her first words while I was making her breakfast, a garbled version of Mama that made me cry happy tears. I dated occasionally when I felt ready, but I was no longer desperate to fill any void. I had learned that I was complete on my own. Any partner I chose would need to add to my life, not complete it. That standard eliminated many candidates, but it also protected me from repeating past mistakes. 5 years after my divorce, I can honestly say I am grateful for what happened, not for the betrayal itself, but for what it taught me. I learned that I am stronger than I ever believed. I learned that my worth is not determined by someone else's opinion. I learned that walking away from something toxic is not failure. It is survival. Patricia reached out once about 2 years after Lily was born. She sent a letter asking if she could meet her granddaughter. I read it carefully, considered it seriously, and ultimately declined. Some relationships are too damaged to repair. Some people have demonstrated too clearly who they are. Protecting Lily from that influence was more important than offering Patricia redemption she had not earned. Derek eventually remarried to someone I never met. I wished him well, not because he deserved it, but because holding on to anger would only hurt me. Forgiveness was not about excusing what he did. It was about releasing its hold on my heart. My life now is quieter than I once imagined it would be. I wake up every morning to my daughter's laughter. I go to a job that fulfills me. I spend weekends with my parents who treasure every moment with their granddaughter. I have friends who know my whole story and love me anyway. I have peace that seemed impossible during those darkest days. If you are watching this and you recognize something in my story, something that echoes your own experience, I want you to know that you are not alone. The person who claims to love you while treating you with contempt, they are not your only option. The family members who belittle you, they do not get to define your value. The fear of starting over it is real, but it is smaller than your capacity to survive. You deserve to be loved properly. You deserve a partner who chooses you every single day. You deserve a life where you do not have to shrink yourself to fit someone else's expectations. And if you are not receiving that right now, you have the strength to build it for yourself. I know because I did. What would you have done if you overheard your husband and mother-in-law plotting against you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I would love to hear your perspective. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps more people find this channel and hear stories that might help them feel less alone. And if you have not already, consider subscribing, so you do not miss future videos. I share new stories every week about real people navigating real challenges. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Sometimes a story reaches us at exactly the right moment. You never know who might be going through something similar and could use a reminder that they are strong enough to survive. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. Whatever you are facing right now, I believe in you. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next video.